Hello and welcome back. We have a very busy schedule in week 15. I teased a little bit of what we'll talk about today in last week's video, but there's a lot going on, and if you want an edge in your matchups this week, you need to watch this video and pay attention closely. Let's jump right into the schedule. This week is jam-packed with games, 57 in total. With that many games, we have something we don't see often, and that is 20 teams play 4 times this week. That means that almost everyone you own will get good volume, and so will your opponent. So where can you gain an edge? Now, first off, Carolina and the Rangers only play twice this week, and if you own Kochetkov or Ranta, this is probably the week to drop them and start streaming somebody else until we see how the three-headed monster situation plays itself out. I could even envision the Canes sending Kochetkov down to get some games in the AHL because he's the only one that's waiver exempt. As for the Rangers, let's just hope you're facing someone who owns, I don't know, Shesterkin, Panarin, Zibanejad, like Mohawk Moose. Now, as I mentioned last week, the Flyers have the Unicorn 5-game schedule: Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. 5 games in a week is almost unheard of. Now, it does include 2 light nights, or a couple of light nights there, and then Tuesday, which is somewhat light, and Sunday, which is light as well. So they have a very difficult matchup on Monday against Boston. Then they're at home against the awful Anaheim Ducks, home against the Hawks, and then on the road at Detroit, and back home Sunday against Winnipeg. So that's not just a heavy schedule. There's a lot of travel in there as well, albeit not crazy travel in terms of distance. You're going from Boston to Philly and Detroit to Philly, but nonetheless, 5 games with travel. So there's a lot going on in terms of the Flyers fantasy schedule this week, and they're definitely going to use Ersson and Hart this week. So if you get a minimum of 2 starts out of Ersson, you might want to pick him up. But aside from that, what else can we look for in terms of Flyers ads this week? Now, the Flyers, you're going to want to look for a few things. First, you want dual position eligible players because they do play some heavy nights as well, and you'll need the positional flexibility in order to get them in your lineup because most of your lineup will be playing on those nights. Secondly, you want players that get top power play minutes because playing that many games will mean it will be difficult to score 5-on-5. So they're going to have to get a lot out of their power play, which they've been getting some production out of a lot of guys over the last week or so, and we'll go over that in just a second. Now, it goes without saying, if Travis Konechny is available on your wire, go grab him immediately. I don't know why he would be there, but he's only 83% owned. He's the 22nd ranked fantasy player over the last 2 weeks. 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points, 3 on the power play, 19 shots in 6 games. So he's obviously the own. He's the top player on the Flyers in terms of their player ranking on the Data Draft Player Hub. The second best player is Scott Laughton, and he's the number 1 ad this week for me. 21% owned. I already picked him up a couple days ago. I'm winning this week 9-1, so I figured I'd get out ahead of the waiver ads for next week. Dual position, center left wing eligible. 7 points in his last 6 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, 3 power play points, 10 shots, and 13 hits. So he's doing a little bit of everything. And he's definitely he's playing top 6. He's getting power play time. So Laughton and Konechny are the 2 most ownable Flyers. Obviously, Owen Tippett, we'll just jump right to him. A goal, 2 assists, a power play point, 14 shots in his last 4 games, and that's the 3rd highest player on the Data Draft Player Hub. Then you also have Joel Farabee, 4% owned, dual center left wing eligible. He's got 7 points in his last 6 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, identical to Scott Laughton. So both of these guys are excellent options, especially when you're going to get a lot of volume out of them this week. You also have Kevin Hayes, who was in John Tortorella's doghouse. Currently, he's listed on the 3rd line, but that line has Scott Laughton on it, and I forget who's on the right wing, but they're kind of trying to balance out the lines a little bit, especially where they're going to have they had 3 games last week, they have 5 games this week, so they're probably trying not to load up the top 2 lines. They're trying to spread out the minutes a little bit. Kevin Hayes, 27% owned, center left wing eligible, 7 points in his last 6 games, 1 on the power play, and 21 shots. He's mostly an assist guy, but he does shoot the puck a pretty decent amount for an assist guy, so he's somebody that you could look to target. Now, I didn't have room to fit him on here, but if you're looking for hits coverage, and you probably are if you're in a bangers league, again, a 5-game week, you're going to get a ton of volume. So Nick Delorier, 23 hits in his last 6 games. That's 3.83 hits per game. And his season average is 4.09 hits per game. And that puts him, I believe, at the top of the league, but he's in the 100th percentile. So he's either number 1 or top 3 in terms of hits per game this season. So Delorier is your hitter for this week if you need hits, just strictly hits coverage. You also have Patrick Brown. Now, Patrick Brown, 24 hits in his last 6 games, 4 hits per game, but his season average is 2.83, 94th percentile, so a little bit lower, a little bit less consistent, but both of those guys are going to get you a ton of hits in a 5-game week, and they're both playing together on the 4th line, which means they're not going to get a lot of time, and they probably aren't going to get as fatigued as some of the guys up here who are at the top of the lineup. You can't really expect these guys to get a lot of peripherals in a 5-game week, especially at the back end of it. They're just not going to have the energy to throw 5 or 6 hits a game, but the 4th liners will. So those are the guys you could potentially target for hits coverage. And then last week, I also mentioned Morgan Frost, who's not on here. You can see from the Data Draft Player Hub over here, he's pretty low in terms of his completeness. This ranking is a measure of how complete a player is in a hits and blocks league. So some of these other guys are better options, but nonetheless, a goal, 5 assists, 2 power play points in his last 6 games. So he's still playing really well. For deeper leagues, if you can't get any of these guys, I mean, you should be able to get Farabee or Tippett. But if not, JVR, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points in his last 6 games. And Noah Cates, 3 points in his last 6, and he's been getting some top line minutes here and there, just kind of filtering in as they're trying to stagger out some of their lineup and roll 4 lines over the last couple of weeks. But nonetheless, a lot of the Flyers have been producing, and that's good news heading into a week where they're going to get 5 games. So these are the guys to look for. Just pick out which guys fit best with your league format and your point weighting system. And then again, Ersson, over the last 2 games, 2 wins, 982, and a shutout. So Ersson has been playing really well. Carter Hart's going to get probably 3 of these 5 games, I would imagine. He's got 3 wins in his last 4 games. So things are pointing in the right direction for Philadelphia Flyers. They're probably not going to get a lot of wins out of this stretch. Maybe they'll get the Ducks and the Blackhawks win. This one might be a toss-up. I wouldn't expect a win against Boston or Winnipeg, but who knows? This is a crazy league and anything can happen on any given night. Now back at the schedule, our second best schedule this week is the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have the perfect Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday schedule. Now this particular week, you would prefer a Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, because Tuesday has fewer games than Monday, but nonetheless, they still play 3 of those light nights. So you want to use some Penguins to try to maximize your roster for this week, because those are the nights that your opponent isn't going to have as many guys in. And they're going to have a difficult time trying to balance all the heavier nights, getting all of their top guys in the lineup. So this is a chance that you could potentially add some value to your team. Now they have an easy game against the Ducks on Monday, then 2 games that could feature a lot of offense against the Senators in a home and home. And then they have a Sunday matchup against the Devils, which will be a little bit of a wild card, but it should be a great game to watch. So with all that said, who can you look to target from the Pens? Now, this isn't as easy as it usually is. The Penguins are currently 21st in the league in goals for, but they are 14th in expected goals. So it seems like they're just a little bit cold right now. That also applies to Sidney Crosby. He's cooled off a little bit. Letang still grieving the loss of his father. It was a really nice gesture that the whole team flew to Montreal to be there with him for his father's funeral. Very classy move. He's still listed as NA in most leagues. I'm not going to speculate on when Letang will be back or what kind of mental state he'll be in when he's back. But for the time being, the guy taking his spot on PP1 is Ty Smith. So Ty Smith, 2 power play assists, 11 shots, 9 hits in his last 4 games. And I did a little bit of an analysis for one of our Discord members looking for guys who were in the top 80th or higher percentile in goals and shots. And Ty Smith was one of those guys on that list, albeit it was a very small sample size because he hasn't played a lot this year. He was mainly featured in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and he's just been called up with the departure of Chris Letang for the time being. So he's been getting the PP1 time, and this is a potential opportunity. He's not necessarily a long-term stream, but in a week like this, unless Letang starts to come back at some point during this stretch, I would definitely try to roster Ty Smith on those light nights. If Letang doesn't come back till later in the week, you'll probably get some decent production out of at least the first 2 games from him. Now, and this next player is a guy I had on my team. I had to drop him because I had too many forwards. I wish I didn't have to drop him because he's really good as a hits guy. Jason Zucker, 23% owned, single left wing positional eligibility. That's part of the reason why I had to drop him. 2 goals, 1 assist, 16 hits in his last 4 games. That's obviously 4 per game. And he's been a guy that's been getting it done in terms of his hits coverage and goal coverage. He's been up there at the top 80th percentile or more in hits. And then he's, kind of in the same range in terms of goal production. He's one of those guys that I featured in like the top point producing hitters graph that I did a couple weeks back, as he's been getting over 2.5 hits per game, and then also adding some offense to that as well. I just don't have the room for him on my roster. So if you do, he's definitely a guy to go pick up. And again, it was a little bit difficult to try to find some value here. Ricard Rakell's 58% owned. 2 goals, 2 power play points, 13 shots in his last 4 games, dual position eligible. But he's the one of the only other guys that's been in the top 200 over the last 2 weeks in Yahoo category rankings. So he's a guy that is probably owned up in your league. But if he's there, this is a really nice week to stream him. You're getting him all the light nights, and he's probably going to be, if not top power play unit, second power play unit. And he's playing with Malkin, playing with Zucker on that second line. So this could be a nice week to stream him if he's available for you. Now, when it comes to goaltending, Tristan Jarry is on IR, but it doesn't seem long-term. Regardless, in the meantime, they have to rely on either Casey DeSmith or Dustin Tokarski. And I forgot to put up here, this is Ty Smith's Player Hub. This was from earlier, so I'll just leave that up there. You can glance at that. But as we look at the goaltending, Tokarski, he comes in 2 games played, he gets a win, a .915 save percentage. But if you look at DeSmith, 5 games played, only 1 win, an .889 save percentage, and one of those games he got yanked early, and he had a .40 save percentage in that game, and it likely destroyed your entire week goaltending-wise if you're in a category league. So that's a little bit concerning for Casey DeSmith. So you may want to look at Dustin Tokarski if Jarry is going to be out for this entire week. Again, whoever plays against Anaheim is probably going to win. I would want to own that guy for the rest of the week because they'll probably play one of these 2 games and then maybe this game. If it were me, I would stream the guy playing Anaheim. I would hold on to him until the end of this game and then drop him because I don't want any exposure playing against the Devils. But that's just me. You can do what you want, but this is the info that you need to have. Casey DeSmith has been struggling. He is 21% owned, so he's probably not the ad this week. Tokarski would be a streaming option, .915 save percentage, 1 win in 2 starts. So not the best numbers, but not bad at all as we wait for Tristan Jarry to come back. Now back at the schedule, the next best schedule this week is Colorado, who play Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. So 2 off nights and a team that you can potentially find some waiver value with, especially with Landeskog still out for a while. Darren Helm, Manson, Byram, Nichushkin are all quote-unquote not close, according to Jared Bednar. So there are guys who are filling in and stepping up in the lineup. They do have some matchups here. This Vancouver game, that could be a goal fest. This will likely be a little bit tighter, especially on the second night of a back-to-back. So if you add Avalanche, this is going to be a heavy night. Maybe you don't need to play them in this Seattle game. But there could be some offense in this game against Detroit. There could be some offense in this game against Calgary. Who knows? They're mid-pack defensively. So there is some potential value here, and there are guys you can own. So right now, things are almost at panic level in Denver. The Avs are second worst in the league in goals for. Never thought I'd say that about a defending Stanley Cup champion. They are second worst at 20.54 goals below expected, meaning they are snake-bitten and starved for offense. Now, despite Georgiev returning back to earth, the Avs are 4th in the NHL in goals against, so the clear problem has been their offense, but the big boys are getting it done. McKinnon, 9 points in his last 6, Rantanen, 8 points in his last 6, Makar, a point per game in his last 6. All 3 of those guys ranked in the top 100 in fantasy over the last 2 weeks. And the only other Avs player to join them in the top 100 is Arturi Lehkonen, who I mentioned in a video on New Year's Day on the Week 13 schedule video. And if you picked him up at that point, I got him shortly after that. You've gotten pretty good production out of him. 2 goals, 4 assists, 2 power play points, 15 shots, and 14 hits in his last 6 games, covering a little bit of everything. If you look at his player hub, the power play points per game is elite level, and that's why you own him, because he's on that top power play with all of those incredible players, and he's relatively ownable, 58% for a guy on the top Colorado power play unit. That's why you want him. Now, the shots are pretty decent. The assist coverage is not bad at all, 85th percentile. Same with goals, same with points per game. You're going to get some hits. So 1.39 hits per game, 62nd percentile, same percentile for blocks. So very complete player, which is why he ranks as an 80 on the Data Draft Player Hub. And that's why I've been owning him, because it's very difficult for me to drop him knowing that he's 95th percentile in power play points. And I'm trying to boost some power play point totals going forward. So this is a guy that I personally own. And it's great because you do get that positional flexibility as a dual position left and right winger. Now, speaking of positional flexibility, the second best owned this week is Evan Rodriguez, 18% owned, 3 position eligible, which is big, especially because they do play 2 of those heavier nights. So if you pick up a guy, you're going to want to try to get him in on those nights where you have everybody in your lineup playing. This is going to help you do that. It still he may not factor in on those nights depending on your roster, but at least you have more of an opportunity to do that. In addition to that, 10 points in his last 8 games, 3 goals, 7 assists, 2 power play points. He's top power play unit. He's currently playing top line. They've been putting Rantanen on the second line, so it's Rodriguez, McKinnon, and Lehkonen on the top line. So he's getting top line minutes and top power play exposure. So he becomes the next best add this week. If you can't get Lehkonen, I would advise going out and getting Evan Rodriguez. Now, when I talked about it the last time, JT Compher was very similar to Rodriguez, but he's been on power play 2. He's on line 2. But with Rantanen now playing on the second line, you have Rantanen and Newhook with JT Compher. That's the second line that they're rolling out according to Daily Faceoff. So that line may give you some decent offensive production as well. Just not as good of a stream as Rodriguez with the top line and the top power play exposure. Nonetheless, 18% owned, dual eligible, a goal, an assist, 9 shots in his last 3 games. So he's a pretty decent streaming option. If you're in a deeper league and you need some help there, Newhook only 2% owned. He was ice cold, only 1 assist in his last 11 plus games before last night. But if you picked him up last night for whatever reason, streaming option, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 shots. So an excellent game. I believe he had a facial injury, so he was battling through that. But nonetheless, I wouldn't recommend him longer term. If you're in a deep league, if you want that add, he's second line with Compher and Rantanen. Anybody playing with Mikko Rantanen is going to get some points. He's been very hot this year. Now, one more thing I did want to mention. In the beginning of the season, I mentioned how I expected Francouz to take the net over from Georgiev, and that didn't happen in the first half of the season. Georgiev was great. He was one of the top-rated goalies on the Data Draft Goalie Hub. However, Georgiev has never played more than 34 games in a season. Right now, he's at the 30-game mark. So the next half of the season is a complete mystery in terms of how Georgiev will perform. So if you liked my thought process on Francouz versus Georgiev in the preseason, now would be the time to pick up Francouz, who's only 29% owned. You look at, Georgiev's 94% owned and Francouz 29% owned. And in his last 2 starts, 1 shutout with a win in the last game, 153 goals against, 949 save percentage. And then you look at Georgiev, only 1 win in his last 4 starts, 304 goals against, and a 912 save percentage. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. In fact, this was one of the things I mentioned as one of the things I got wrong, from preseason till the end of 2022. I did that look back at some of my predictions, and this is one that I definitely got wrong in the first half. If it were to come true, it would make more sense to come true in the second half when Georgiev has never played a full season as a starter. So something to keep an eye on. Probably not going to be a sure thing or a lock. But again, Francouz now becoming a little bit more of an important streaming option with the Colorado Avalanche being the 4th best defensive team in the league and also having Georgiev starting to struggle a little bit. So just something else I wanted to bring to your attention in case you're in need of goaltending. Next, we'll take a look at the Friday and Sunday schedules, as they are 2 light nights, and you'll probably need some options heading into the weekend. So keep these names in mind or come back to this on Thursday night. So for Friday, we have a couple of matchups here. We already touched on the Penguins and Avs. So for Vancouver, Luke Schenn, if you haven't been paying attention, he's been getting it done over the past couple weeks. In his last 6 games, 4 assists, 10 shots, 30 hits, 10 blocks. And that's what he's known for. He's a hits and blocks guy, 4.67 hits per game. That's number 1 in the league. And then 89th percentile in terms of blocks, 1.64 blocks per game. But then on top of that, he's starting to add in the offense. So that 4 assist game bumped him up to 65th percentile in assists. So he's been, catching the eye of some guys. I've heard trade rumors about him potentially coming to Tampa Bay. Or at least Tampa Bay being interested in him at the deadline. So that could be an interesting, development if you own him and he goes to Tampa Bay. That could be very productive for your team. Nonetheless, he's definitely a hits and blocks guy that you definitely want to own on your roster if you have those categories. I own Gudas, and he's getting a little bit more offensive production and some more hits than Gudas this year. So this is definitely something for those banger leagues. If you don't have those, or if you need an offensive forward, Andrei Kuzmenko. So I looked up the production in games versus Colorado. He's only played 2, 3 points, 2 goals, 1 assist, a power play point in 2 career games versus Colorado. So Kuzmenko, as we look at his player hub here, 94th percentile in goals, 0.88 points per game. On top of that, the power play production is pretty good, 0.24 power play points per game. I'm not sure if he's still factoring in on the top power play unit, but nonetheless, in a situation where you're in a light night and you don't have a lot of options, he's 46% owned, so he may or may not be there for you. But if he is there, he is definitely productive against Colorado. But so too is Ilya Mikheyev, so 5% owned for Mikheyev. Again, a dual position winger, a goal, 2 assists, a power play point in 2 games versus Colorado. Very similar. Goal production, pretty good. 0.31 goals per game, 86th percentile. A little bit lower, definitely lower in the power play points. The assists are still there. The shots are pretty good. The point per game is good, but not quite as good as Kuzmenko. You don't get any hits or blocks, so I wouldn't pick him up necessarily for a bangers league. But again, for this one start, if you're looking for a weekend ad, Mikheyev would be an option there for that Friday night, which is a lighter night. The next guy that we have here, Derek Brassard, I have, just on here because he's played against Pittsburgh so many times in his career. 24 points in 30 career games versus Pittsburgh. Most of the Sens are owned up. You could try to, stream Shane Pinto, somebody like that. But Derek Brassard, with the history against this team, 0% owned. So if you're in a deep league, this would be an ad that you could put in for Friday night and probably get an assist, a couple points maybe, if you're lucky. But Parker Kelly is the next guy on the list, and he's here for one reason, and that is hits. 26 hits in his last 6 games, 4.3 hits per game, 96th percentile on the year, 3.13 hits per game on the year. I picked him up 2 weeks ago and streamed him, and he was very good for hits coverage. He was averaging over 4. He might have even been over 5 hits per game in that particular week. He's a dual eligible hits guy, so that's also something to look at. A guy like Reeves is just a single position right winger. Tanner Jeannot is dual eligible, but he's not scoring either. So between the two of them, if you're going to get slightly more hits coverage out of Parker Kelly, especially on a light night like this, I would definitely take a look at that. And just a reminder, if you want any of these player hubs or goaltending hubs, which I just updated, I updated both of them last night, you can find them in the Patreon link in the description below. Now, as we turn to the Sunday schedule, same type of thing, but a little bit different in terms of the teams that are playing. We went over some of these guys, the Penguins, the Flyers, etc. So we'll look at some of the other teams. Let's start with Dylan DeMello. 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points, 16 hits, and 12 blocks in his last 6 games. So as you can see from his player hub, he's mainly an above average hits and blocks defenseman. But getting this production offensively is a nice little bump, and he is playing top pair minutes with Morrissey. So that's a reason to own him as well. If you're choosing between 2 players, he's going to be out there a lot more playing with Morrissey, and that could potentially be a reason why he went up in his offensive production. 5 points in his last 6 games is unusual for a player like this, but he's done it and he's hot, so you might as well ride that streak. The second player that we want to touch on is Cole Perfetti. Obviously, anytime you're talking about the Jets, he's an add offensively speaking, as he's one of the only ownable guys in the top 6. He is 3-position eligible, center, left wing, right wing. That is very favorable for fantasy matchups. 5 assists, 1 on the power play in his last 5 games. Definitely an assist guy, gets some power play production. You'd like to see a little bit more shot volume out of him. Not scoring goals either, but nonetheless, playing with Scheifele and Wheeler, that's a combination that last time that they had this, before they had some injuries and things fell apart a little bit, he was averaging a point per game throughout 10 games with those 2 line assignment partners. So Cole Perfetti, always a good streaming option when it comes to the Jets. And he would be a guy I would look to, especially against a very, very exhausted Flyers team on that Sunday game. Up next, we have a guy who kind of popped off in the last week. He's getting a little bit more time on ice, upgraded minutes because of some injuries on their blue line. Guys like John Marino still out. Ryan Graves, 9% owned, a goal, 5 assists, 6 points, 14 shots, 10 hits, 21 blocks in his last 7 games, averaging 3 blocks per game over that span. 94th percentile in blocks. That's what you're getting him for. Not really a guy known for offense. I would have expected a few more hits out of him, but nonetheless, you're getting blocks coverage out of Ryan Graves, and then lately he's been getting some offensive production as well. But if you want offensive production out of New Jersey, Thomas Tatar, currently with the Garden Seat, playing with Jack Hughes, 17% owned, dual eligible winger, a goal, 6 assists, 2 power play points, 14 shots in his last 7 games. And you can see here he's pretty productive offensively. Not going to do a whole lot for you with hits and blocks. The power play production is pretty low. Not a lot there. In fact, those 2 power play points might have contributed to him being 60th percentile. He might have been 0 before those 2 power play points. So if he's now starting to factor in on the power play, that is something to keep in mind. I believe he's power play 2, but if he's going to get elevated, anytime you're playing with Jack Hughes, I definitely want exposure to that if I'm streaming a guy. So he's a guy that you could look for in a nice matchup against the Penguins, who are, again, this is their 4th game of the week. But one of the better Devils options that nobody's really paying attention to is Dawson Mercer, 18% owned, center, right wing, 4-game point streak, 6 points in his last 4 games. He was a shot volume guy at the beginning of the season. That's kind of cooled off now. So you're just getting offensive production, some power play totals here and there. The blocks are okay. Nothing crazy here. A lot of these guys that you're seeing are going to be in the mid-60s in their rating because they're either going to be specialists at 1 or 2 categories, or they're going to cover a little bit of everything in this kind of fashion. So if his hits were a little bit higher, he'd factor in a little bit more. But nonetheless, pretty productive, 0.63 point per game for a second-year player. It might actually technically be a rookie, but he did get some time last year. Nonetheless, 6 points in his last 4 games, riding that hot streak. That's what you'd be looking at for Dawson Mercer. Now, when it comes to the Kings, we're going to start with Gabe Vilardi, 30% owned, left wing, right wing, dual eligible. 7 points in his last 6 games, 3 of those on the power play. He's mainly known for his goal production. As we saw earlier in the season, 92nd percentile in goals, 0.38 goals per game. Really good pace there. The shots, a little bit below 2 shots per game, but that's not bad. 0.17 power play points per game, pretty good, 78th percentile. But he's the guy that's ownable right now. For the Kings, if you have him available, Adrian Kempe is the ad. 3 goals, 2 assists, 4 power play points, 15 shots in his last 3 games. But he is 70% owned. So if he's available for you, then he's the own for sure. He's been one of the top 10 or 15 players in Yahoo category leagues over the past week. So he's definitely the ad if he's available. The reason he's not on here, he's 70% owned, so he might not be there for you. And then again, obviously, Arvidsson, Deneau, and Moore are all excellent streaming options for the Kings. Almost any time that I'm talking about the Kings, I mention those 3, especially if they're playing Chicago, which they are on this Sunday matchup. Now, for this Vegas Golden Knights against the Coyotes, there probably are going to be a lot of goals. William Karlsson, 27% owned, dual eligible, 4 points in his last 4 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, a power play point. I'll bring up his player hub here. Again, you're seeing a lot of the same type of thing, mid-60s, pretty productive offensively. You're getting a couple more assists here. The same type of shot production, slightly below 2. Power play production's not bad. A couple of blocks there as well. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, Phil Kessel. There wasn't room on the screen, but nonetheless, Kessel, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points in his last 4 games, and he's playing his former team in the Coyotes, and he's got 19 points in 19 career games against Arizona over his career. So if you're desperate, a guy like Phil Kessel could be a nice add. That's the 8 o'clock game, so that's the last game of the night on Sunday. If you're panicking and it's 6:55, and you're thinking, wait a minute, who could I pick up to potentially put me over the top? Maybe Phil Kessel is your guy. Monitor what he does this week, but nonetheless, he's on a nice little streak here, 4 points in his last 4 games. Now, there is one other thing I wanted to talk about. Final note for the video, I had to mention this. I was a fan of Eeli Tolvanen a long time ago when he was getting power play time in Nashville. Since being claimed by Seattle, 5 goals, 1 assist, 6 points in 8 games. If you look at his hub, granted, small sample size, but 88th percentile in goals, 0.33 goals per game. And then the thing that surprised me is his hits and blocks coverage. 79th percentile in hits, 78th in blocks, averaging almost 2 hits per game. For Tolvanen, I would have expected more shot volume and fewer hits. So it's a little bit interesting to see that he is a little bit more complete in that sense if you're in a bangers league and you want to potentially add him for that. He's only 14% owned, so that could potentially help you out, and his ownership is only going to climb as he continues to score goals like this. I would imagine that because of his goal scoring, he's probably going to start to get more opportunities on the power play, and if that happens, he could potentially start getting some power play goals and some power play points in addition to this stuff as well. And his power play points per game is 0.09, so there is room for improvement there. And then you're looking at his team exposure. Seattle is now the #1 team in the league in terms of goals for at 108 goals for. So keep an eye out for Tolvanen in tomorrow's video highlighting the top performers from week 14. I'm sure he'll factor into that. But that's going to do it for this one. If you want any of the player hubs used in the video, also have a goaltending hub. I didn't cover goaltending in this video because most of the time this week, with most of the teams playing 4 games, you're going to get your goaltending minimum starts. We did highlight some of the guys that are playing on the weaker nights or the off nights, guys like Francouz, guys like Tokarski, etc. But you can look at that goaltending hub and also make some more informed and data-driven decisions about your team. And you can find that in the Patreon link in the description below. Remember to like and subscribe. I'm about 40 subscribers away from 2,000, trying to hit that goal before the All-Star break. And with your help, we could get there potentially even as soon as this week. Remember to follow Data Draft on Instagram at data_draft for some quicker updates, some shorter form content. And as always, I will see you in the next one.